The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's broadcast. This is a webinar on equipment type approval, and I am Daniel Humeyer. I am going to conduct the webinar today. Let me just reorient myself here at the beginning of the presentation. And can everyone give me a hands up if you can hear me? Okay, thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Philmore. Thank you, Mohammadi. Rui, okay, great. So this webinar is being recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel, most likely later today, if not tomorrow. And we highly recommend people to go to our YouTube channel to see other webinars, including this one that we have covered in the past. So if you miss it or you're not able to attend, well, you're attending it now, but if you're not able to stay for the whole webinar, you can always watch the rest of the recording when it's available publicly. Okay, so having said that, I have added a handout on here that is available for everyone. So if you wish, you can have a copy of a summary of the presentation today in a PDF file. And that can also be obviously distributed. So let's begin. So today I'm going to focus on one of the modules of SpectrumE, the e-licensing module, and in particular use an example of equipment type approval processing. And I'm going to highlight how this is done online, highlight how this kind of transaction can be performed between the public and central authorities, such as the Telecommunications Authority, that would typically be, in charge of approving type approval certifications, and also highlight a few other features in the e-licensing module that help what we would call an internal user or a representative of the Telecommunications Authority or the authority in charge of handling these types of requests to adjust the controls in the input entry fields, what we call business rule management, as well as workflow management. So I'm going to highlight that today. Just a little bit of an introduction about us in case this is your first time attending one of our webinars, and give you a little background who we are, what we do, our general focus, and our representative offices. So who we are, what we do. We are Spectrum Center. We are Spectrum Management Specialists. We are the unification of the former ATDI offices in the US, the UK, and Brazil. Our core business is the focus of reselling our commercial off-the-shelf software solution known as SpectrumE. It is sold in a variety of manners. Software as a service is one, or subscription as a service. And we also offer perpetual licensing option for SpectrumE as well. And it comes in a few different modules, which I'll highlight a little bit during the course of the presentation. For today, we are focusing on the e-licensing aspect. We also focus on providing enterprise solutions based on what we call modified off-the-shelf implementations of adapted versions of SpectrumE. So usually each time we implement a spectrum management system for a customer, we have to do a little bit of adaptation, reusing, of course, the commercial platform, but modifying it to some degree to meet customers' needs. And we also offer professional services, consultancy, measurement drive testing, and custom software development for customers in the spectrum regulatory market as well as commercial industries. Our representative offices are the following. We have two in the US, Spectrum Center Inc. and Spectrum Center LLC. Spectrum Center Inc. is basically where majority of the development of the core product is performed. And we have, while technically we focus mostly on what we call IT Region 2, We don't, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you can't see my screen. Hold on. Let me see. Sorry about that. Thank you for the clarification. Sorry about that. It looks like I'll just backtrack a little bit um, here, but some of this has already been covered in previous webinars. I forgot to turn on the view of the screen. So I think everyone can see the screen now, right? Okay. I think everyone can see the screen. All right, good. Sorry about that. So we're summarizing just who we are, what we do. I kind of mentioned it in the audio, but you can see the summary here. We're the unification of the former offices in the US, UK, and Brazil, and summarized our business focus. Go to the next slide. This is the organization of the offices. So we've got Spectrum Center Inc. We're based out of McLean, Virginia in the United States. We have Spectrum Center LLC, also based out of McLean, Virginia in the US. Spectrum Center Inc. is you could say the central office, and we focus on supporting customers worldwide. The core product is developed out of Spectrum Center Inc. And Spectrum Center LLC is primarily focused on professional services for the U.S. federal government. And we also have Spectrum Center Limited, which has a primary focus on IT regions 1 and 3. And it's based out of the United Kingdom. And Spectrum Center in Brazil, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, is based out of Brasilia, and its focus is primarily on tending to Anatel of Brazil, the telecommunications authority of Brazil. So a little bit of past performance. Here's some of our current clientele. So we've got a number of customers around the world, regions 1 and 2, and we're expanding into region 3. And as you can see, we address customers large and small, big regulatory customers like regulator of Brazil, of Argentina, of Mexico, smaller Caribbean regulators, medium-sized regulators. So we have a good deal of experience in deploying these kinds of systems for a variety of regions and territories. And like I said, we are growing. We'll soon make an announcement as some new opportunities and customers in Region 3 as well. That would be the Asian area. So we'll go over very quickly the Spectrum E platform. It's composed, as I said, of 3 modules: e-licensing, technical analysis, and remote monitoring. They can be sold individually. The design of the platform is to enable what we call an internal-external user interaction between the telecommunication authorities administration as well as the public. So the idea is to try to facilitate this interaction in an automated and efficient manner. This is becoming probably more and more critical during the current crises, the health crises, where in-person type of visitation is trying to be limited. And so the ability to allow the public to interact through some sort of a virtual portal and do the kind of work that they maybe would have done in person, trying to do as much of it online is becoming more and more necessary for all enterprise organizations. And so today I'm going to focus on e-licensing. We're going to briefly go over how an external user can register themselves to access the system, to do some sort of, or make a request or perform a certain task. Then how they could register perhaps an organization that they may represent. And then finally, how we're going to use the example of a type approval application request, how a type approval application could be submitted online, processed, and how the certificate could be generated and then validated as well. And during this, I will show a little bit how the system's workflow management capabilities operate, as well as how the business rule engine can be modified by an authorized user. This would be what we call an internal user to the regulator. License application. So we're going to focus a little bit on how applications are processed, the workflow process of an application. Highlight a little bit of an example of some previous success stories that we've done, particularly the one in Argentina. I'll describe a little bit how the business role manager works, the workflow manager works, and then a little bit about how the certifications are generated, in this case for type approval, but they could be for any kind of a report from the system. And a nice aspect to it is a QR code feature that allows someone to verify if a certification is authentic or not. A typical license application workflow. This is a very generic diagram. Everyone can still see my screen, right? Okay, looks like everyone can see. All right, good. This is a very generic diagram on the right. It's not meant to be a standardized way of how a government organization would interact with the public, but this is just to give a general idea where what we call the business user or the external user. I'll probably use the term external user more commonly throughout the course of this presentation, but they're meant to represent the public citizen that needs to do some sort of a business with the regulator. And so this type of a user, they can be an individual or they can represent an organization. The system can support either types, and the user could also support maybe multiple organizations. They could be maybe a legal representative of multiple businesses, a lawyer, or something like this. But they need to be able to access the system, ultimately be able to upload some sort of an application request, and then the application request needs to be validated automatically and then submitted to the what we call the internal user or the government side user. And the government side user would then proceed to do their own checks with their own internal validations after they confirm they've received the application request. If necessary, they would do technical reviews. In the case of, let's say, a microwave frequency channel request, it would be like an interference analysis, perhaps, or some sort of RF engineering analysis. And then they would make some sort of a permanent change to the database, or they would reject the request, which is a possibility. But if, let's say, they were to accept it, then the database would have to be updated, and as the request would ultimately become what we call an authorization or a license. And then usually there's some sort of a billing process that accompanies that. So you can see there's an invoicing phase, and then there may be a payment phase, and then those steps some can precede the other. It's not in concrete which comes first, the authorization gets issued or the invoice gets issued. But that's all, a little fluid that we're, stuff that we're able to adapt to based on the customer's requirements. So the purpose of the interaction, of course, is to allow this authorization process to work through an online portal. And it has to be able to support any kind of relevant request, whether it's for spectrum usage, equipment type approval, et cetera, user registration, changing company name, et cetera. Now, the e-licensing module includes a business rule engine with over 300 business rules for specific fields, for different types of forms, whether it be a equipment type approval or it be a frequency channel request or whatever. And we'll highlight that a little bit later today. And this is the business rule engine is highly customizable. We'll highlight a little bit how that is performed, and how adjustments and modifications to the business rule engine can be implemented, as long as the system workflow management. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on editing the workflows because it's a little time consuming, but I'll give an idea on how it works during the course of the presentation. Now, here's a success story. Here's a screenshot of some of the performance results of the system that we implemented in Argentina known as Hertz. It's the Spectrum E system. It was rebranded as Hertz for the Argentinian regulator, ENACOM. and this is from May of 2018. So the system did go into production, I believe, in about early 2017 or so. So it's been in production ever since, and ever since they got the system into production, the amount of applications that they've been able to handle has increased dramatically. I believe today the system processes roughly 90,000 application requests for a new spectrum or new requests or modification of existing requests or suppressions or cancellations. And as you can see here on the right, I'm sorry, in the left-hand pie chart, it's in Spanish, but the orange part represents homologaciones, which means type approval. So about 25% of the requests are equipment type approval requests. The rest are primarily for spectrum services, spectrum-related services, 1% for temporary use of spectrum. And the majority of the users, roughly about 24,000 users, are what we call external users, meaning outside of the institution, outside of Ennoconn. Roughly only 100 or so, I think, are internal to Ennoconn. So as you can see, it's a system that's designed to support the public large-scale usage, and the system is designed to scale accordingly. And we've developed it to support horizontal scaling. So we're aware of potential costs that could come when you have tens of thousands of potential users trying to access your system concurrently. And so we've designed the system to adapt and scale the appropriate way without requiring expensive investments into hardware architecture. So here's a little bit on the business rule manager. So this is, of course, exclusive to what we would call an internal user. This would be a user with appropriate permissions inside of the regulatory authority or the enterprise. They can edit and personalize the field controls for different forms or business contexts through the Spectrum GUI. So the field controls that can be applied include but are not limited to in range, not in range, minimum value, required field. So here, and I'll highlight this as I go and do the software representation, the context is selected at the top, and that's basically the type of form that or application that's being used at the time. So we have obviously several types of context for spectrum services, for type approval, etc. And in there, the different types of rules can be assigned, and you go about creating your rules as you pick the rule and you pick the key, and the key would essentially be the field. And you can then go populating the business rules and editing them as well. If you wish to remove one or if you wish to modify them, you can do that as well. So I'm going to highlight a little bit how that works during the presentation. And the system also includes a workflow manager. And the workflow manager is similar. In the case of type approval, the workflows are the type approval workflow that's included by default in the system is composed of about roughly 6 states. And you can see them listed here. You've got draft, pending, understudy, licensed, pending renewal, and rejected. Depending on what transitions are executed at each state will take you to another one. But the order of the states and the what we call transition events or actions that are applied at each state can be modified and edited by the user, and additional states can be introduced into the workflow. So that is also available to an internal user with appropriate permissions or privileges. So I'm going to show a little bit about that during the demo, but again, it's a little lengthy to create a workflow. So just a very quick highlight. But if anyone has more questions on how that works, feel free to contact us. We'd be more than happy to engage in a more detailed presentation. And here is an example of a type approval certificate that the tool can generate. This entire certificate is leveraging a report template, and the report template can be edited It can be modified. One thing you'll notice is the QR code here on the right. So that QR code helps in the case of inspections. If, let's say, an operator has a type approval certificate that they post, or an importer, for example, has that they post in their building, or to post with the equipment they're importing, an inspector can come scan the QR code and determine if it's an authentic certificate or not, because the system will check with the server if that certificate has been registered in the system. So this helps mitigate falsifications, type approval certifications that can obviously impact how equipment is imported into the company, or into a country, I should say, into a jurisdiction. So this is an example. I don't know if I'll be able to show this because this would be working off of a cell phone, but you could use your cell phone if you want during the course of this presentation and scan the QR code that I'll generate with the certificate when I complete, and you'll be able to see if it's a pass or a fail. So obviously the inauthentic certificates, or the certificates that are not registered in the central system, would produce a fail, in which case the inspector would know that that certification is not valid. Or if it is, it would produce a pass in green here. So that will be basically, what we'll do towards the end of the presentation. So that's for the PowerPoint. Let's go here. So I'm going to begin with the first step that I had mentioned, which was to begin an external user access. So I'm going to go online for now for the beginning part of this presentation, and show how an external user can submit a request. But then ultimately I'll go offline actually to do the rest of the demonstration. But let's say you go to spectrum.center, you click on the request access option, and here someone can come in and put in some sort of first name, last name. And I made a dummy email here, and say, please give me access, and on behalf, or with what organization. So if you're just doing this for a trial or a demo, we have a dummy organization. But if it were a true implementation there, if, let's say, you're working with your local regulator, and your local regulator is using our platform, you could put in the name of your local regulator in there, so the system will know which database to call. So I'll put in here, please let me in. So here the request goes out. So now I'm going to come in as an administrator type user of the system, and I see a request just came in just now. So here I can choose to grant access or deny access. Now that doesn't mean the person will then be able to do whatever they want with the system. There's still several other steps to be able to actually use the system and authenticate their credentials or their access, authenticate who they are, but it gives them a first chance to at least upload information to authenticate the person, and then after that they can have access to the system. So if I were to grant access, by default we use a timer. It's limited to 52 weeks. This by default allows a person or the system to basically self-regulate the access of the external user, because these individuals can be transitory. You could have one person representing a company for a certain period of time and they move on. And if that's not always updated, then you could have this kind of person having an access that they shouldn't have for exceeding a certain period of time. So we can also synchronize this kind of access with maybe other internal systems that the regulator may have for authenticating access from the public. So that's very common as well. But by default, we use this option. And if I say, let's say, okay, we're only going to grant the person 1 week access. Okay. So that's been approved. Go to the database. This person has been now approved. So we've got SC Legal Rep. I've done it a few times, as you can see, but they've been approved. And I should have, let's see, here we go. I've got an email in my SC Legal Rep here email account that I have access to SpectrumE. So after that, there's a process for creating a login password and things like this, but I'm gonna skip that process just for the sake of time. Let's say I've already created my password and I've authenticated myself. Now I can log into the system and I can start doing some work. So that's just to show the email notifications and everything operating for the external access. I'm going to jump over to the offline mode and continue with the presentation from there. And I'll be going in between what we call external access and internal access. So I'm going to continue to use this identity, this username for the external access, so the SC legal rep. And my internal access will be an internal user credential that I'll highlight when I get there to that point. So I'm going to log into the system, very identical to what was online, and I'm going to go into the e-licensing option. So here you can see that this particular user has been authorized to represent these three companies, because obviously I've been repeating this presentation over and over again, so I've been making multiple organizations that I can represent, but that could also be reflective of reality. You could have an individual that may represent multiple companies, could be a lawyer, could be a consultant, etc. And so that's why also you need kind of restrictions on who they represent and for how long they represent them. But let's say this user represents one of these organizations. So if the company that I want to perform my request on my application on the behalf of is already registered, all I have to do is select that company. For example, I'll pick this one called Importer 777, select org. And so now when I do any one of these, when I select one of these options like type approval or point to point or whatever, I'm operating on behalf of that organization. So that way I can work on behalf of different organizations without mixing everything up. If the organization does not exist, maybe it's a new organization and I've never registered them before, then I have to go to the request tab here and I have to register them. So I'm going to click on the register option. And this is where I would create a new potential customer. So put some sort of ID. This is obviously dependent on how the authority wishes to work, how they wish to identify a company versus an individual. This could be a tax ID or some other type of value that allows them to uniquely identify individuals versus organizations. And I can put in, let's say, importer 888 started 777, and we'll put in any town USA and +1. Put in 703-111-2222. And let's say if I don't have the rest of this info or I forget it, if I click validate, the business rule engine will tell me that those are required fields. So I can save the request if I wish as a draft and then come back and fill that in when I want. We can also allow the request to be sent incomplete. We don't require that all the business rules be fulfilled 100% necessarily, because we understand some customers, some of our customers, some regulators aren't that demanding on having everything be complete, or we can obviously keep the restrictions. So in this case, I'm going to obey the notification there, the error message, and I'm going to put in some information. So I'm going to say Fred. Well, we already did this one. Fred Importer again, and we'll put in we'll do the SC legal rep email. So I do the validation. There's no errors. Save. Here you go. So here's my draft organization request. Now I can add attachments to that if there's additional information that's necessary to verify that, let's say me, Fred Importer, I'm allowed to register this company and this is a real company and so forth. So to that I can add any legal documentation that's necessary. So I'm going to go to my appropriate folder here. So let's say, there's some sort of legal documents that I wish to apply here. We'll do, let's say, this guy, and then have a certificate of incorporation here. And if there's any photos, let's say maybe there's like a passport card or some sort of identity of the owner. And this can all be obviously very customized depending on what kind of attachments the local authority would require. So this is just an example, and of course we can continue to add more files if I wish. And by default, we support PDFs, JPEGs. We can adjust that as well if the customer wishes to only support specific formats or specific file sizes. Those rules can also be applied. So file uploaded successfully. So if I want to check, I can always go back and view the attachments so I can see, did this load in correctly? And I'll see inside the browser, it looks like it took the attachments properly. So everything looks okay, and including the image. So everything loads in the browser okay. So it looks like that's good to go, and I should be able to submit that request. And so here I go as the external user. I'll click submit. Now it's right now in a draft state, meaning I could delete it. After I submit, I won't really be able to delete it. I can still cancel the request, but it's a process. It's not automatic. So right now, as long as it's in a draft state, I can completely delete it if I change my mind, and that's no problem. But once I hit submit, there's some terms and conditions. These are kind of shrink wrap legal language that can obviously also be customized based on the jurisdiction and the legal requirements. But once I accept these terms, then my request is going to change state, and it's going to be to -2 submitted state. And as you can see, I can't directly delete. I can cancel the request, but I have to get approval to cancel the request from the recipient, which would be the authority. I can still view the request information. As you can see, I can't edit it. Same with the attachments. I can still view the attachments, but I can't upload any additional attachments. So there we go. That's been completed. And now if I come in as the internal user, so this is my internal user credential that I'm going to use. So the internal user, as you can see, has a much broader dashboard, additional options, has all the modules activated for engineering analysis and so forth. And they will see incoming requests for organization registration. I see one right here. This is importer 888, and I can review. So I can look at the information, but the business rule engine should have ensured that is properly entered. But if I wish to call the company or call this representative and understand a little bit more or ask questions, I can do that. I can view the attachments just as before. So if I want to view any of these documents, they'll open in the browser. It's a little bit of like documentation management, and that all looks okay to me. And then I can either decide to approve or reject. And let's say if I decide to reject, maybe that there was something faulty in the request. So I can say you are missing an additional document of accreditation. I think that's spelled right. So I can say, okay, I rejected it. And as you see, it goes out of my bin as the internal user, and it'll get returned back to the external user. So now the external user will receive this notification. They'll see the request was returned as rejected. They can view the memo, and they can reset the state back to the draft state, so then they can correct the issue, which I will do right now. So I'll say, okay, I'll add an additional attachment. I forgot there's an accreditation document that I was also supposed to apply. So here's my accreditation report, and I will save it, close, and now everything should be complete. We'll assume it's uploaded right. I'll submit it, accept. Now it's submitted again. Now the internal user, spectrum.center. So we'll go in, same as before, go into, in this case, they go to the data store tab to get access, but they see the request again, they check the attachments. Yep, accreditation report is there, that's good. They view it in the browser. If everything looks good, then they can approve it. And they say, okay, that looks good. And now it's in the license portion of the registered organizations page. So now if the external user wishes to act on behalf of that organization, they can. So log back in and they'll see now in organizations, they've got importer 888, and now I can act on behalf of that organization. I can also modify it. If let's say something happens and the contact information changed or whatever, I can click on modify, but in which case what will happen is I'll create a duplicate request of that registered license or authorization, and then I have to treat that as a request again. So if I click modify, that authorization gets duplicated as a request again, and I begin the process over again. I can go back. You see it's gone back to the draft state. I can edit it and I can change what I wish. So it goes through kind of a very similar process as the initial request went through. And then when it's finalized, this authorization will be changed, and whatever I change will be taken into account. So that's modification process works very similar, and the cancellation process works very similar. I can ask to cancel this, and it has to go as a request. Okay, so let's pretend that everything is fine, and well, pretend we have already registered organizations, and I wish to now go ahead and do a type approval request. So we went through external user access or organization registration. Now I want to submit a type approval request. I'm going to use this one here, the importer 777, and I'm going to select that organization. And I'm going to go to type approval. So now I'm acting on behalf of importer 777. So I have a request that had already been preparing. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to pick this one, because it takes a little time to fill out the type approval form. And I don't want to go through the whole thing in the demo because it's pretty tedious and it's self-explanatory. But if I go in here, I have a draft request that I had prepared. And you can see I've been filling out the fields that I have access. Maybe I don't have information for every single field. For example, fax number, that's not a common thing anymore. People don't use fax so much, so less and less companies have that available. But I want to import this 5G smartphone. It's a fantasy equipment, not a real one, but from Samsung as a manufacturer. And I've gone ahead and input as much information as I can. The units can be represented in the power units can be represented in different values here, different unit types. So you can see here after I've entered in what we call like the kind of more administrative information, contact information of manufacturer, I start to enter in the details of the specific equipment that I'm trying to import. And I have here an interesting option where I can define the frequencies and related powers. So here I'm entering in frequencies in transmit side and receive side. This isn't required, but if I'm interested in doing it, I can. So if I want to add, let's say, another transmit frequency, let's say I put in 815.25 to, let's say, 823.25. I can do that, and let's say I want the max power to be 2 for that. So I can do that there, and if I want to duplicate that, I can. So I don't have to double it on the receive side manually. I just duplicate, so it saves me a little bit of time. And I can also remove any one of these if I want. I can remove the records here, but this allows me to identify the transmitting receiving frequencies that are related to this particular equipment that I wish to import. If I have third-party verification information, sometimes that's available or not. If this equipment was, let's say, already type approved from another entity like the FCC, for example, and I want to just basically inherit that approval in a way. I get a third-party verification, and I have that. And let's say I don't have the details of the contact, I fill in as much as I can. And here I go and I fill out the details of, let's say, if it was the FCC that ultimately did the approval, then I put in as much information as I can about that. And then I do the validation. And in this case, I see there's a weird business rule that pops up here where it wants me to give the fax number. And so, like I said, fax numbers are not very common anymore. I don't know why this form is asking me for a fax number, but it's not asking me for an email, which is probably more important. So that would be a case where maybe the business rules would need to be modified. So I'm going to go into a separate browser here to pretend, so we can do this simultaneously. I'm going to go in as the internal user. Go. So I'm going to go in here, type approval, and I have here rule manager. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to the type approval application context form, and I'm going to see the rules that were put in here. And these are the only rules that I've applied here. I don't have any limit in how many rules or few rules I wish to apply. These are basically all the fields in the form, and I can apply a rule for every field. I can apply a control for every field if I wish. And I see here I've got the contact fax. I don't need that rule. I can remove it, but I should have agency contact email. So I'm going to go to agency contact email. Here we go. I'm going to say it's a required rule. Remember the rules that I highlighted earlier. And I'm going to add that. I'm going to say, okay, that should work this way. And so let's go ahead and close this guy. I'm going to have to log out and log in just to register the change. But here we go. So I'm going to go back here, select that org, go to type approval, go to my draft, and I'll expand this again. And I'm going to go to view edit. And now when I run my validation, it's updated. Now it's no longer asking me to enter in the fax number. It's asking me to enter the email, which is a much more relevant piece of information. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the email, so that may be important. And I didn't put any rules for these other fields. I could add them if I wish, but let's say we're satisfied with this. So I'll save that. And so here I can, just like in the organization's request, I can add attachments. So here I have like a different list of documents that are relevant to a equipment type approval. So you've got, but this can be obviously personalized to whatever is required. But here you have safety reports, EMC reports, manuals, type of previous approval, type approval certification. So I just go adding my documents as I see appropriate. So here I might have, let's say, some sort of a technical document. Then I'll have previous type approval, and I'll have report. And I just go about filling this out as I feel necessary. Let's say I don't have those other documents, but I have a safety report, and the requirements on what should be included can be determined by the local regulatory body. And maybe a user manual would be useful. Should have that here, and maybe a good snapshot. I have a screenshot of the equipment. Here we go. Got a nice image there. I don't know if that's is that a JPEG? No, let's see. So I'll save it, close. So those attachments are now associated to this request. I can view them if I wish. So if, let's say, I want to see type approval, here's an example. Here's a type approval. Okay, that this was already approved by someone else. If I want to see, any of these, a PDF, here I have a sample of like a power of attorney. And so that looks all good. And let's see if this image will appear. Okay, that one downloads because it doesn't open in the browser. In the case of an image, it doesn't open in the browser. It'll just download locally. But that's fine. If everything else seems okay to me, I can say that looks good. And if I have multiple requests of a similar type, or if I just don't want to do the data entry over and over again, I can duplicate the request. It won't duplicate the attachments. I'll have to redo the attachments, but I can duplicate this request and it can save me some time. So sometimes you may get multiple requests from a single organization, and rather than doing the data entry on every single one, it can save time to just duplicate. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. Again, you have to accept the terms and conditions. Now it's pending status. Now I cannot edit this again. So if I go to view, I can see that I don't have the option to save anything. Same with the attachments. I don't have the option to upload new attachments anymore. So that's sent out. Now I go in as the internal user. Go to data store and I go to type approval request, and I see an incoming request here. So I can choose to pick it up. That will simply give a notification to the external user that it's been received and it's being analyzed. I click pick up. Okay, it came in successfully. Now it's under study, under review, and I can of course go in, see everything, see if this looks completed to the satisfaction of the regulatory authority. Look at the attachments, same as before. Here I can see, okay, this is I think this is just an example of a PDF, but can look at all these attachments. If there's more, of course, that I require, I can always go back and say reject, just as before, send a notification. Say you're missing additional documentation. I need a lab safety report, or I need something else. And but if that's all fine, then I can approve the request. We have two options: approve and reprove with expiration date. We've got a little bit of a debate internal or with amongst our customer base that is wondering if type approval should come with or without expiration dates. We give both options. We don't know which would work better. I think usually they don't. So in this case, I'm going to go approval. There's not going to be a specific expiration date, but if I were to pick the expiration date, I just have this extra option to assign the expiration date. But here I'm going to approve the request, and I'm just going to give the date. Here I have a calendar picker if I wish to give a different date, but I'm going to go ahead and save that. So here's my database of type approved equipment, and I have a pretty long one. I'm only seeing 30 records there, but if I expand the view to the total amount, 666, I can see all the equipment that's been type approved there. And it automatically generates a type approval certification number. The algorithm that we use takes an acronym representing the organization, the authority, the type of approval, in this case TA for type approval, the kind of authorization, and then it's a numbering value that's repeated every year. So for example, if I want to see what's been done in 2020, I can just do a filter here, see 2020, and I can see it's gone sequential. Every approval that I've created has gone in a sequential manner. But we can also change this if you wish to use a slightly different method for creating a type approval value. We can do that. So here is the new one that I just made just today on May 21st, 2020. This is the Samsung equipment. I can view the attachments. I can also submit a request to modify if that was necessary, but it shouldn't be. And then I can also generate the certificate. So I click on generate certificate. And this is going to be what we talked about, the QR code. Ooh, block my attachment. Always allow. So I'm going to have to do this again. Here we go. So here's the certificate. It automatically assigns, of course, the approval number, the issue date, creates the QR code. All this can be edited. I'll show a little bit on the template editor how that's done, and it creates a certificate. And we can always add a digital signature if desired. So all this language can be customized in the template. So here as the internal user, I do have the option to view that. I believe here's the template manager, and I can edit the template here how I wish. So I have I can change the logo. I can call different templates, different headers that I may have for for different types of certificates or licenses. I can change the title of the template, etc. And I can change the language here. So if I wish to change this language, I can just edit it. It's got a little word processor editor inside, and pretty simple. And I can preview it by just hitting the print screen, and it should produce a preview of the report. And so pretty straightforward, not very difficult. We do offer a little bit of training on using the template editor. Obviously, that wouldn't be just for any user. It would be for a user with a little more technical capability, but very simple. If you understand basic query language, query syntax, very, very simple to create this, the different templates and edit them and so forth. So this case, of course, I do not have this. If you were to scan this particular certificate, it's going to come out as a fail. If you guys have a QR code scanner on you, that's a fail because it's not connected to our central database. This is not, I'm working offline here. But if I were to go online here, say, I'm going to go here to, actually, let me try this guy. I'm gonna have another. If not, I think I have this already printed. So, so here we go. Get this already. So because this is online, if I were to produce this, for example, this certificate through our online system, if you scan this one, you'll get the pass QR code that I highlighted earlier in the PowerPoint. So you should get the two results. So if you have a QR code scanner, I recommend doing the test, comparing this report versus this report. So you'll see, how it works, because this is actually coming from a centralized repository. So that is basically the summary of the presentation. Oh, one last thing about workflow management. I forgot to highlight that. So we do have a workflow manager. Works similar to the business rule manager. You pick the form that you want to edit. So if let's say I'm doing type approval applications, you can see here the states that are assigned to that context and for the internal or external user. And so those you can add new states. These are the transition events. So TA1 draft, you can edit, you can add attachments, view attachments, submit, duplicate, and I can add new states. I can also change the transition events, add new transition events, etc. for specific states. So this is like a workflow editor. Allows let's say the IT department of the regulatory authority to modify workflows. As business processes change over time, they may need to do that. So there is that capability in the tool as well. All right. So that's it for the presentation. I'll go to questions. So let's see here. I think we have a number of questions. Oh, so sorry if there was a buzz on the microphone. I apologize. Not sure why, but we'll go through questions here. So, oops, hold on. Let me turn off my headset. Sorry about that. I don't know if you can hear me better. If you have more than one modulation, you can just add a comma to the corresponding form. So, for example, let me go in as the external user. I apologize for the audio. I didn't realize it was not working well. If I create a new equipment, for example here, if I have multiple modulations, I can just enter them and just enter them like that as commas. Continue to enter as many as I wish. Okay, so
let's see here. There was another batch of questions that needed to open. Attendees. All right, here we go. So that's one question. And bring this out again. An example of a certificate. I think you've been able to see the example of the certificate. So again, if you want to trial this, please let us know. We can help you trial. I apologize for the audio. I hope the audio comes out okay on the recorded video that's on the YouTube channel. And once it's ready, I think you all will receive a link to look at the YouTube video. But you can always just go to Spectrum Center on YouTube. And it's also on our website. If you go to our website here, so we have the website for the software, spectrum.center, but if you click on the bottom here, it'll take you to public.spectrum.center, and so that's our website there. And if you click on this link, follow on YouTube, it should take you directly to our YouTube channel. And there, hopefully the audio is working better. So I apologize for that. Didn't realize the audio was not working well while I was doing the presentation. Okay, so are there any other questions? I guess I think we're okay for the questions. And yeah, if anyone wants more information on this, just let me know. Let us know. You should have our contact information. If not, you can always go to our website, public.spectrum.center, and send us a question or some sort of a request. Also, you can always email sales@spectrum.center, and we'll receive your requests, your questions. So I think that's okay for today. If anyone else wish to learn more, just let us know. Thank you, everyone.